Support for WMNF comes from listeners like you and TEDx University of South Florida, featuring Held Together, an independently organized TED event exploring resilience, storytelling, and community, happening March 7th from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. at USF's Oval Theater. More information is available at TEDxUniversityofSouthFlorida.com.
Welcome to True Talk on WMNF 88.5 with Ahmed and Summer. On today's program, we're going to be speaking about what's happening in Tallahassee. State legislators there have a few bills that they're trying to push through that will target the Muslim community. People are saying they're unconstitutional, and they're targeting Muslims to try to silence them, especially any criticism by Muslims about Israel's genocide. What's really behind this and what these laws will do, we'll be discussing that. And also the Epstein file releases, and will there be war with Iran? That and more, and my co-host Samar Jarrah is back on the air and will be with us. Stay tuned. This is True Talk on WMNF.
عايش بالناس غريبة مش عارف وكري وين الو 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 يا عمري وينك الو يا شبابي وينك الو يا الغالي وين الو الو سلم لي عالحبيبة عايش بالناس غريبة مش عارف وكري وين الو يا حبيبتي نعرف اللي طالت غيبتي الأيام ضحكوا على شيبتي وشيبة ولا تشيبة ما حبوا طيبتي ناس تستنى في خيبتي والأرنبة طلعت ذيبتي وشوفنا منهم خيبة قالوا يا الغالية شلز شباب على إيطاليا البحر وامواج والعالية وغرقين وغرقات وحمام وجالية ذات يميني وشمالية وفكري كان في اللمالية الوحش كبر يا الأخوات الو 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 يا عمري وينك الو يا شبابي وينك الو يا الغالي وين الو الو سلم لي عالحبيبة عايش بالناس غريبة مش عارف وكري وين هجرنا كي تسكر بابنا ما عرفنا شكون أحبابنا والصافي من الخوان وينك يا بلادنا حبيناها بكاتنا نسبعتنا.
Welcome back to True Talk on WMNF 88.5. Balti Alo Alo, he's calling himself, talking to himself, and now we're talking to you. So Summer is with me. And before we get into the main topic that I mentioned earlier, we're going to, discuss whether there's going to be war between the United States and Iran. In the past couple of weeks, we've seen the U.S. move significant military, military personnel in the area, aircraft carriers, warships, fighter jets, and missile defense systems in response to this growing friction with Tehran. In the meantime, President Trump is saying that he's trying to negotiate a new nuclear deal, but also criticizing Iran, saying they're killing protesters. So two things that he wants to get out of this is to stop nuclear weapons, at least in his words, and to force them or pressure them to stop killing protesters. The president's envoy, Steve Witkoff, is speaking with the Iranian foreign minister about, I guess that's who's leading these discussions. I think Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, is also involved. So the big question is whether war is going to be happening there or not. Summer, what do you think?
Assalamu alaikum, Ahmed. Good to be home to cold Florida. And thank you for doing the show while I was away. Actually, I have different perspectives from the Arab world. It's very interesting, Ahmed, how much they are following what is going on in the US and what is going on with Trump. And they are fascinated by the Epstein files, not in a positive way, of course, and surprised that US media does not mention the Israeli connection or the so-called Mossad connection when they talk about Epstein. They just talk about sexual escapades, women, rape, big names, but never this connection with Israel. And when it comes to Iran, there is actually a discussion and a debate happening in the Arab world, especially if you listen to discussions going on spaces like X and Instagram, where the Arab world is saying, we are classically Sunni. The majority of Muslims in the Arab world are Sunni, and Iran is Shia. And they now believe that this fostering that was going on for the past 30 or 40 years, or maybe since the Islamic Revolution, and creating animosity between Sunnis and Shias was really a targeted Western ploy in order to divide and rule. And maybe now, if Trump really wants to do a regime change, they feel that it is a regime change more than destroying nuclear power, they should be siding with Iran and not allow the US to overthrow the regime in Iran, not because they favor it or like it, but because they think there will be a negative consequence to the Arab world and a domino effect that might not be good for the region. So just wanted to give you
So, I mean, are they, is this the governments that are saying this, or
No.
this is just the people and the opinion of the public?
Okay, mainly the people, because they're the ones who are being targeted when creating rifts between Sunnis and Shias. But you have countries like Turkey, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar who are actively doing diplomacy and visiting each other and trying to stop any regime change or any war in Iran, because they know it's going to spill over.
I mean, I've mentioned this last week or the past couple of weeks that the main reason, or one of the main reasons, other than oil, of course, and resources, that the U.S. or elements within the U.S. foreign policy establishment want to go to war with Iran, have been pushing for. It's been mainly for the sake of Israel. That Israel wants their neighbors to be weaker states, fragmented and divided. They managed to, they were the biggest cheerleaders, especially Netanyahu, who's now the head of the government there. He was cheerleading and lobbying for the war in Iraq. And, he even attended congressional hearings where he said this. And then when you bring that up to say that it was Israel that was pushing, and neocons who are loyal to Israel, who are pushing for the war in Iraq, and eventually it led to their fragmentation. Yeah, they're still one country, but really they have different areas of power, autonomous areas in the north, etc., and they still are reeling from sectarian, divisions. And then later on, this moved to, the effort to try to fragment Syria as well. But this is the new Middle East idea that they want to push weaker states so they're not seen as a threat to Israel, and it's easier to manage instead of bigger states that are powerful in the region. So are people also saying that this is really for the benefit of Israel in the region to to go to war with Iran?
Yes, Ahmed, absolutely, especially in light with this peace, global peace. I forgot the name of this thing that Trump created. They see it as a counter for United to make the UN obsolete. And then this idea of creating a Gaza resort. They feel that this is part of this scheme, that they really want to get rid of any regime that thinks of resisting Western imperialism. Whether it's in whether they see it as like there is this unity between the dreams of Israel and the aspirations of Trump and his children and in-laws and those who are just seeking to make more profit and more money from the region. And they think that Iran, Hezbollah in Lebanon, because, you know, they are bombing Lebanon on a daily basis. They just want to weaken every nation that can stand in front of this scheme. So some of it is colonial, and some of it is economical colonial control. That's everybody, Ahmed, even lay people in the streets. They, as if, you know, the October 7 made people read more or see clearly what is going on in America and in Israel. It is, I mean, you know how many times you and I go to the Middle East, but this time is like shocking how much people know, almost as much as you and I know. When it comes to you.
Before people used to give the benefit of the doubt, or they wouldn't, you know, say like, wow, this is two conspiracies and, you know, it can't be that much. But post October 7th and the genocide in Gaza and the international institutions being paralyzed, not able to do anything, not able to intervene, not even the Arab states and the Arab population are like, what's going on? We're seeing people get murdered left and right, genocide happening daily. Everybody's seeing it. This is not something like people can claim what was happening during World War II and the Holocaust. It was like, you know, people didn't have the evidence at the time. Yeah, in hindsight, a lot of information came out afterwards. But at the time, the public did not know. The Nazis were clever in hiding what they were doing. But now, this time around, and it's very obvious. It was in real time, and people are seeing in the streets, and no one is able to stop it and saying, wait a minute, everything that you've been lecturing the world about, these international institutions lecturing the world about human rights, democracy, rule of law, international order, Holocaust, genocide, ethnic cleansing, all these rules don't apply. It only, you only enforce it when it's brown people and, the global south that are doing these things, people in Africa. You only intervene in places like Rwanda and others, and in Sudan and in Darfur, and you talk about all these places, but Israel is doing it real time, and they're bragging about it. And their soldiers are making TikTok videos and distributing it everywhere without any type of shame. And there are no consequences. So that woke up a lot of people. It removed the masks. And I think the public there is a lot more aware. And I think that's putting pressure on these governments in the Middle East who have historically been able to use authoritarian measures to control their populations. But they can't really do it anymore. And I think a lot of people, even in the West, are concerned that it's going to spin out of control and people are not going to, have it. And what are people saying about this board of peace that some people are predicting that it's Trump's effort to undermine the United Nations and replace the United Nations somehow of the body that would, intervene in these conflicts? Because now you have so many states that have signed on, but somehow this board of peace has a permanent leader, which is Donald Trump.
You know what is sad, Ahmed? And this is what I did all the 32 days I was gone. I went to Egypt and to Jordan. I was defending the American public and people and citizens and people like who listen to us and people who are protesting what's going on in Minneapolis, because they said they don't understand our electoral system, and they think that all Americans...
Do we even understand it?
No, I meant like they think that everybody in America who voted for Trump, and people approve of his policies. So really seeing images like coming out of Minneapolis is I hate to say this, but it is very, very positive for the image of Americans, because it shows that there is resistance to what is going on. So, Ahmed, I keep telling them only 77 million people voted for Trump, and there are more than 200 million people, eligible voters, who did. Do the math. Not everybody voted for him, and some of those who voted for him are regretting it and are very vocal. So, what is sad is that he reflects what is negative, and people don't see what is positive that might be going on with people who are resisting. Like, for instance, our station, they had the last thing I want to say, I was invited to a dinner with a number of, people who have good jobs in Egypt, and some of them work for non-profits, and some of them work for non-governmental anyways. And when I tell them I have a radio show with my co-host, they assume it's in Arabic, and they assume when I tell them it's in English that it's only for Arab audience. But when I tell them it's for Americans at large, they are still surprised. So there is so much that America needs to tell the rest of the world. And one last thing, Ahmed, why people there know more? Because, for instance, when you are watching satellite TV news, you can have different stations, but who are coming from Arab nations that are opposing each other policies. So if you're listening to a show, let's say, represents Syria, Lebanon, Iran in Arabic, they will tell you what a perspective of what is going on in America. And then if you're listening to the Egyptian or Saudi or the Emirati or Algerian, you will find another perspective. So they are more exposed to different opinions about one issue than we are here, unless you go out of your way, away from the mainstream media, and listen to, for instance, our show, or alternative media, or Democracy Now! For us. So that's why they are more, let's say, aware of what is going on. But they laugh at Trump and his policies. They like every day they say, "Oh, we go to Twitter just to find out what is the orange doing." They call him the orange.
The orange. Well, they call him the orange man here too. So, yeah, they call him the orange guy here. But the majority of the people that voted for Trump, or a big portion of them, it was because of the economy, and he kept promising he's going to make the economy better. And now people are turning against that because he hasn't delivered on that, and he's spending most of his time on foreign issues. And a lot of it is just how to enrich himself. And the surprising part is all these people that are, especially on the Republican side, that said, we want government to have a smaller role in our lives, spend less, smaller government, and the whole issue with Doge at the beginning, and Elon Musk going in and firing people. Well, government is, the budget is even bigger now that they're proposing, and especially the military budget. And they see what, ICE was doing, going out and actually killing even, U.S. citizens. The first person that, or one of the first people that ICE went after, and snared them, and kidnapped them. Do you remember who that was?
The first one?
Yeah, one of the first.
Yeah, the Muslim college kids.
Yeah, Mahmoud Khalil.
Mahmoud Khalil and the Turkish.
Yeah, the first one, and then the Turkish and others, and they were snared. They were kidnapped. They're masked men off the streets, and people kind of said, well, they're immigrants, or one is a green card holder. They were protesting. They were speaking. They were opposing. They were doing the encampments. And even though it turned out that the woman, the woman that's originally Turkish, who was kidnapped from the streets, there was nothing else in her file except that she co-authored an opinion piece in her school newspaper. There was nothing violent about her or anything else. and they were, held in detention for weeks. And then it escalated. Then it went after Hispanic people, and, picking those people, or it was the Venezuelans, and saying that they were gang members, and they shipped them off to El Salvador, and they were showing off all their tattoos. And people still said, well, these guys, they weren't really speaking out because, these are bad guys, look at all their tattoos. And then, then they shifted to Hispanics and Latinos, and even they went further to Cubans and in South Florida. And these Cubans majority of the Cubans in South Florida voted for Trump because, he's against socialism and communism. And, these are Cubans in the diaspora that hate, Castro system and the government, the regime there more than anything else. And then he started going after Venezuelans, also in South Florida, that voted, and then Haitians. And now ICE in Minneapolis, they started shooting and killing American citizens, white people. And that's what happens when you just ignore when the other person is being impacted. It eventually comes to anyone that's basically speaking out. And then who else is being charged? I mean, they're trying to go after all political opponents, including even the former FBI, leader, Comey. And, even though the case against him was, thrown out. But again, and Letitia James, another prosecutor in New York, basically using the tools of the government to go after political opponents. And most recently, you see what happened in Georgia by the FBI raiding the election office there and seizing all those documents. Well, how is that keeping us safe? Were there immigrants in there? That's not what people signed up for. And now, this week, Trump is speaking about federalizing all elections, so they're all centralized by his government, and saying all the Republicans should nationalize the elections. What is this that 50 states hold elections? This is actually in the Constitution.
What does he mean by that? I didn't get it.
Okay, every state, by the Constitution, every state are the states that organize their own elections. And they're always, because the founding fathers were worried about a federal government or a federal, system where one executive, one authoritarian or dictator comes in, and if they're in charge of all elections, then they can rig it. So they said, well, if all the states, at the time it wasn't 50 states, but it said the states get to decide how they do their own elections. So every state, that's why there are different rules in different states and eligibility requirements, or, basically ID requirements, et cetera, how they're counted and stuff. So the states get to decide how they do their own elections, and they tally them up, and then they produce it. So then you have basically now at this point 50 different states doing their own elections and then producing the numbers regardless of political party. That's a lot more difficult to get 50 states to be in on some sort of rigged or, fake election, because then you'll have political parties that are, that were different. But what he's recommending is, no, don't let the states do it anymore. The federal government should implement and control all the elections everywhere. Well, of course. And then if you put the people there, all your allies, on that commission that controls the elections, well, guess what? They can fake the numbers.
But that's
what he's suggesting.
So many different employees and system and billions of dollars to reinvest into the voting system. But at the same time, maybe what he has been hinting, he and Steve Bannon, that he could serve another 4 years. And oh my gosh, people in the Arab world believe he's going to do it. He's going to find a way.
Steve Bannon definitely believes it. And whenever the White House says anything, like when they asked him, because people asked his spokesperson, what is her name, Carolyn Levitt, and they said, oh, well, the president was joking. And then they asked him, and then during a press conference, a journalist asked him, what did you mean by that when you said nationalize? And he doubled down and he said it again. So it's not a joke. So meaning all these things are happening. It's a slippery slope. It's obvious what's going on here. The government, the federal government under the current leadership is trending towards more authoritarianism and provoking these things that are happening in blue states. They're targeting people in blue states to try to create, they're not sending ICE, troops in large numbers like they did in Minneapolis to Florida and the red states, because those are already, the elections are already secure there. Trump is going to win those states, or, that's the plan. However, it's the blue states that he has a problem with. How are they going to win the midterms when they have these blue states that are unhappy? And they're worried that if enough, Democrats come out and they win the midterm elections, that it can flip the House and possibly even the Senate, which would spell huge problems for Trump, because then they would start impeachment proceedings. And there's plenty of things, including how his family has made $1.4 billion at minimum, because that's what's documented, in the last year alone, off the presidency, which is unheard of. That would be something, of course, to personally profit from your position in office. At least that's what's alleged.
They are all over the Middle East, by the way, Ahmed. Every now and then, every couple of days and weeks, there is one of the brothers even, I'm not sure if they cover it here, but they go and do deals to open Trump Towers, and lots of business going on. I mean, we're talking billions of dollars. How come there is no scrutiny? How come there is no discussion over this? Maybe
no, I mean, there are some members, but the media is not doing enough of it. Some media are. There is this consolidation. I mean, the thing is, a lot of the media, as you've seen, they have capitulated. Trump sued up many of them, and when he came into office, almost all of them, I think all of them settled. They'd rather just pay him off. And I think when the New York Times tabulation of just from media settlements alone, basically against media companies and tech companies like Facebook, Twitter or X, and ABC and others, CBS, he made $90 million just from settlements alone in just a few months. Instead of fighting in court, they're like, oh, he's the president, he's going to make our life. And if they didn't settle, what is the threat? Oh, the FCC may take away their licenses. There's a lot of this kind of threats that, and then, these business leaders, because they're for-profit companies, they say, well, we'd rather just go along with it. We'd rather, why, have to spend all this money on lawyers and fight? And they all capitulated, including some of his biggest critics. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg, who basically, they kicked him off Facebook. He was there in the front row during the inauguration. And how much all these companies, now on top of that, all those same companies and all these billionaires gave money towards the transition or the inauguration. And which that there's no limitation on that. There are limitations on how much a person can give for elections, but there are no limits how much they give towards, for example, inauguration. So the inauguration was basically sponsored, and how that money is dispersed is also there's not a lot of controls on top of it. Not to mention the plane that he's getting from Qatar. It's one thing if Qatar is donating that plane to the United States government, and then the U.S. government will keep it. No, in this situation, Trump says, I'm going to use it as my personal plane. It has to get equipped like, Air Force One, which has all this technology in it and protections. So the government is going to pay for that. The plane itself is worth $400 million. I think it's going to cost another few $100 million to equip it to be like, Air Force One with all the security. But after he leaves office, he says it's going to be donated to his library, and he'll continue using it after he leaves office. So that means it's a gift for him. So there are all these things. So anyway, he's worried about the elections happening. And I think this is what this is about, to stoke chaos in these blue states, blue cities, to provoke people to get violent, by provoking them, by attacking, by beating them, by even murdering some people. People will respond and riot. And then he'll invoke something called the Insurrection Act, which allows them to basically send in the military and take over the state. And in that situation, you may say, well, it's too dangerous. No, allegedly here, because, I don't want to be sued. But allegedly, this is what other people are saying could happen. It's too dangerous to hold elections now, so we're going to have to postpone elections in some of these blue states. Or if anything, elections will be held, but you have all these military people that are manning the polling stations and others. And, there'll be tighter restrictions. They're talking about you have to show your proof of citizenship when you go vote. So greatly limiting in those blue states who is going to be able to vote. And one of the very surprising thing or telling things that had happened when at the peak after Alex Paredes' murder, and people were calling in from Minnesota for ICE to leave, Pam Bondi sent a letter to the governor, and what she called strongly worded letter. And in it, she basically says that one of the things that would let them leave, so basically saying that these ICE and Border Patrol can leave if you're able to, provide the following or do the following. One of them was to turn over the voter records, the voter data of the whole state to the federal government. Well, why would you want that if your goal is not the election? And so a lot of this stuff is happening. I don't have that. I wanted to get into the story or the issue of what's happening in Florida, but it's all these things that are happening everywhere, all at the same time, across the country, across the world. It's too much. And then the Epstein files on top of it, everything's happening all at once. And it's almost like it overwhelms the system. Yeah. So then in the meantime, while all these distractions are happening, things are being maneuvered and changed, and people can't keep up. So it's like, it's part of, I think, a strategy is to overwhelm the system. How are they going to, if it take a third term? It could be by overwhelming the system, and then it just happens.
Yeah, some people say that, especially, with the Epstein files, trying to figure out what is true and what is AI, because as if there is a plan to release these files, but at the same time to have a concerted effort to release fake images and to dilute really what is. So you spend the time figuring out if this photo is real or this photo is not real, and if this email is fake or real. Yes, they dumped them, but at the same time, there was an effort to confuse the public. So now you have to spend more time to figure out
what's real or not. And that's getting into the topic now. We're going to switch to that before we get into Florida real quick. The Epstein stuff. Those millions of pages that were related to Epstein now public, but they're all just, images. There is, by the way, for people that are interested, a kind of a Gmail way that you can look at, because it's hard to access the data just going on the DOJ website. But this is a nice tool that some volunteers put together. It's actually pretty, incredible, because, people are familiar because the challenge is when you put 3 million images out there at the DOJ website, it's really difficult to navigate through it. So you have to rely on the media. Huh?
Did you try it? Did you try to use it?
Yeah. I'm going to tell you the tool now, and you can test it for yourself later. But I tried it, but it's easier, much easier, because it's like in a Gmail format. You can just search. Everybody knows how to use Gmail. And in fact, Epstein himself used a Gmail account. And it makes it a lot easier to navigate through these images and these emails. So you go to the website jmail.world, J as in Jeffrey, mail, mail.world, and it'll open up as if you're looking at Jeffrey Epstein's email account. Now, of course, there's no new messages since 2019. In fact, the last message that was in 2019 was somebody who said, "Oh, you are dead, LOL, good riddance." Somebody actually emailed that, so that's part of the records. But in there, they also have all these categories of high, celebrities or, famous people that are in the Epstein files. So you can click on Elon Musk, and it'll show you all the emails about Elon Musk and the communication, Elon Musk specifically. Now, in the media right now, after the dump, and as you said, Summer, a lot of focus was on Elon Musk, on Bill Gates, and for example, I think like Bill Clinton and others, and depending on your political party, who they're trying to push. But In reality, yeah, Elon Musk, he seemed like he was an opportunist, especially him. He was saying, oh, I never been to the island. But in the emails, it shows that he was desperately trying to go there and almost begging to go and saying, which night is going to have the best party or, and things like that. But it doesn't seem like he's the biggest criminal in all of this. And the same thing with Bill Gates. Bill Gates was told this story about, he captured or he caught some STDs from Russian prostitutes. But if you actually look at what evidence they're using from the Epstein files about Bill Gates allegedly getting some sort of STD from Russian women, and he was worried that he might pass it on to Melinda Gates. The whole email is actually from Epstein to himself. It's not like an email between Bill Gates and Epstein. It's like as if, he sent an email to himself, and in it says from Jeffrey Epstein to Jeffrey Epstein. So how is that even, it's not like a communication where Bill Gates sent him an email saying, hey, by the way, I got this thing, I got an STD, can I get an antibiotic? And I don't think Bill Gates would need necessarily Jeffrey Epstein. Whether it's true or not, but that to me is a distraction from the other things, from other figures that they don't want you to see. And these are, supposedly there's like over 5 million files. They only released 3 million of them. And when they released these, they redacted, covered up the names of the individuals, alleged perpetrators, people who are friends with Epstein that were emailing him. Many of these are actually redacted. And then they actually did not redact the names of the victims. So in one way, it exposes who the victims are. And another, they actually protects the alleged perpetrators, his friends, in many of these cases. And in some situations, some like dozens and dozens of nude photos of minor children were released without being redacted. So it's almost like you're saying there is an effort or a strategy here to overwhelm, to send so much and mess it up so bad that people start saying, no, enough is enough. We don't want to look at this anymore. And another part of it is to have fake stuff circulating out there, so you start doubting what's true, what's not, like it's a bunch of things. So, it can get overwhelming.
Although, Ahmed, there are so very important issues that journalists should look at. For instance, one of the accuracy.org emails sent last night is about Epstein files show he funded Norwegians behind the Oslo deal, the Oslo Accords between Israel and Yasser Arafat and the PLO. He has contributed something like $10 million to the children of Mona Jewel and Terry Rod Larson, who were accredited with setting up this Oslo Accord. It could be true, it could be not, but there is so much that has to do with politics. And I don't understand why would a math teacher be involved with the Ukraine, involved with Israel, involved with negotiations between Israel and India, involved with drones, like something. Something is going on deeper.
Everybody realized, of course, because he was, and many people already said this, that he was working for Israel. And this is one thing that's being repeatedly left out by the media in America, his working relationship with the Israelis and on behalf of the Israelis, and how this whole island thing was a intelligence operation to control and have blackmail stuff on famous people and celebrities and also people in power. It's pretty obvious that a lot of this stuff, that's what they were doing. And maybe these 5 million other pages or documents that are not being released will be very, very incriminating to very powerful people. And it just shows you how so many of the most powerful people in our society were all somehow connected to this one guy. And he was involved in so many things, and including people in the media, people from Harvard, the president of Harvard, Larry Summers, former president, and he's still a professor there, and so many. So when they talk about, yes, there is the whole issue of pedophilia, and that's how they blackmail people. And that's really, definitely at the core of this. But in addition, there were so many other crimes that were taking place worldwide. Pedophilia was just the mechanism how they got this. It wasn't the goal. The goal of all of this is to control people, and to control people that are in power. And you control them by having compromising blackmail on them. And this is also, from my readings, the KGB used to do this. They may still be doing it in Russia. And the latest part was they're saying, Epstein was somehow working for the Russians. Okay. This is also a distraction. It's pretty obvious who he was working for. And from the emails, when, for example, there was one email where somebody from Qatar was asking for some advice shortly after Qatar was blockaded by Saudi and other Gulf countries, and they were isolated. And Jeffrey Epstein basically tells them they need to do what India did. They have to sing and dance on Israel's tune, to Israel's tune. And when they do, they'll be welcome back. And that was this is in the emails. Of course, Qatar didn't end up doing that, and they're still being attacked by Israel now, and the blockade ended. We want to talk more about Epstein later, but I really want to, mention this because we only have less than 15 minutes left, about what's happening in Tallahassee and why some of the bills there that are really dangerous. And basically, it seems like this year specifically is another distraction from the fallout from Israel's response to October 7th, the genocide that happened there, and the reputation. We talked about this before, the reputation of Israel going, really down. And even Israel is spending millions of dollars to try to refurbish their image within the United States, especially within religious and conservative communities. And on the Republican side, because young Republicans started questioning the relationship with Israel. And so now we see all of a sudden, which I believe is a distraction from that, GOP candidates and politicians coming down, spreading this propaganda that Islam is a threat, and Islam and Muslims are the biggest threat to America, and that Sharia is taking over. It's happening everywhere, from Texas to Florida to other states to Alabama, trying to push that somehow Sharia is the threat and Muslims are practicing Sharia and we have to ban this, and this is the biggest threat to America. When in reality, Muslims are only a small part of it. So now there's some lawmakers in Tallahassee that are trying to push some dangerous laws. Have you heard about it?
Anything? Not recently. I think I have seen something about DeSantis a week ago doing a press conference. Is it what you're referring to?
So you remember at the end of last year, towards the end of last year, DeSantis came out and he did something people didn't expect or weren't anticipating because he didn't really have the authority to do it. He designated a couple of groups as foreign terrorist organizations. And people were scratching their heads because they're like, that's the job of the federal government. Why is the state of Florida and DeSantis issuing an executive order about that? And the Florida law and Florida Constitution does not even allow for that. Like, in order to issue an executive order, it has to be backed up by law. And historically, it's always been this way, the State Department, Secretary of State and the State Department designates foreign terrorist organizations. The United States does not have a domestic terrorist organization list, meaning they don't have a list of, like, the KKK is on a domestic terror list, or the Proud Boys, or any domestic terrorist group, because there are American laws in place. So if somebody does terrorist activities, they go arrest them, they put them in court, they charge them, and then the jury decides what happens. You can't just label a group and say, oh, you're a designated terrorist group, and now all your rights are taken away. It has to be done through a judicial process. And people, the reason why they don't have a federal list of domestic terrorist groups, because the concern about the First Amendment. People have the right to free speech. And if you start just labeling people you don't like as terrorists, and now they don't have, any rights, well, they didn't get their day in court or have judicial process. So they were scratching, like, how can you do this? Back then, DeSantis said something that's interesting when people started challenging him this is not even legal. And he said, well, when the legislator comes back or convenes in 2026, which now they have, I'm asking them to codify my executive order with law that supports it. And this seems like, that's not how legislation is supposed to work. It's not like you do something that's not legal and then you ask legislators to catch up and say, hey, make the order I made, that wasn't legal by passing a law for it. So what is being introduced now is like two bills. And the way it works is they introduce the bills in the House and in the Senate. And then once they pass both sides, then the governor signs it. And these bills in the Senate, it's Bill 1632 and 1634. In the House, it's House Bill 1471 and 1473. So what do these bills do? 1632, in which the exact same version is also in the House, these laws allows Florida to create its own list of terrorist organizations, does not require a federal terrorism designation. So they could put somebody on the list that's not on the federal list. It does not require proof of violence. So they don't even though they say, oh, the terrorist groups, they harm people and they have to do violence, but it doesn't actually require the violence, the group they designated, to be violent themselves. What it does is it criminalizes donations, membership, affiliation, and also what they call material support. And the reason why it's dangerous is because it punishes people based on ideology or association. And it shifts basically a definition of terrorism or terrorism authority from the federal government to the state. And then it just opens the door basically to felony charges without violent acts. Normally, if you're going to be charged with something like that, you have to actually have committed the violence. But what they're saying is now, if they designated a group a terrorist group, and then somebody gives them a donation, or somebody volunteers for them, or somebody is a member, or what they call material support, maybe somebody writes something in the media, a letter or something in support of the organization, that could be, because it's very vague, it could be classified as material support for terrorism, and then that person is punished by a felony. And what is the punishment? It's something like up to 5 years in prison, or it's like a third-degree felony, maybe up to 5 years in prison, and I forgot what the fine is. But doubled with that, okay, this is why it's equally dangerous. So, and how does it happen? Basically, there's going to be somebody, or the person in charge, a chief security officer at the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, will make a recommendation of who should be on this list to the Florida cabinet. Who's in the Florida cabinet? It's the governor, it's the attorney general, it's like the CFO, the agricultural commissioner, and I think there's one more. It's like 5 people all in all. And those 5 people will vote on that designation. So it's only 5 people. It's not the whole legislation. And none of these 5 people are a court of law. So, and the FDLE works, the appointed person in FDLE works for the governor. So basically at the end, the governor can just decide okay, I want this list. I want this person on the list. His FDLE guy can recommend it. And then the cabinet, which are all Republicans and allies of the governor DeSantis, and they can just vote on it. And based on that, and then once they vote on it, then they have to publish it in some sort of gazette or a journal or a publication. And then that group that they designated has 30 days to appeal it. Where do they appeal it? They appeal it in the court in Leon County, where Tallahassee is. However, here's the dangerous part. The accompanying bill, SB 1634, creates what's called a public records and secrecy. What this does is it says, normally, in Florida, you have something called the Sunshine Law, which public meetings and information or things that they use have to be disclosed or available to the Florida public. You also have something like you can public request, the public can request records from the state about certain things that they've done. This 1634 says that the bill 1632 would be exempt from public record. So it exempts the record how? It says basically it exempts records related to the terrorist designation from public records law and from Sunshine Law. So this in essence, is secret evidence, meaning the FDLE guy can recommend an organization, does not have to disclose what evidence he's using for that organization, for that designation, and then the public doesn't get to see it. And the people, the cabinet, when they vote on it, they also don't have to disclose that. So the public doesn't know what the real reason is for that designation to take place. And even the group that's being designated is not allowed to see that same evidence. The only way they could see the evidence possibly is if they do the appeal and they go to court with a judge and the judge rules to release the evidence, but he doesn't have to either. And that is completely unconstitutional, because you should be able to know the evidence against you when you're being designated, especially for something like this. And that's the danger in these bills. 1632 and 1634. In it, there's also an anti-Sharia component. In the House version of the bill, explicitly says that Sharia is a foreign law and it has no place in Florida and it's dangerous. So these are really dangerous bills, and it's not getting enough scrutiny. They've already passed 2 committees, one in the House, one in the Senate. And these bills have a total of 3 committees in each. So they have a couple of more committees. But the questions and the conversation among the lawmakers in these committees don't go to the heart of this. And overwhelming, the public comments, over 90% has been against this. But despite all that, the members on the committee, both Republican and Democrats, with the exception of a few Democrats, have voted to recommend these. And that's why these are really dangerous. Even though they're targeting Muslims now, they could probably be used to target others in the future. And all it takes is the governor to just doesn't like a group. They can designate them as a terrorist organization and essentially criminalize what is free speech and advocacy.
Do they specify what is Sharia what Sharia laws, like are they going to come to my home and figure out if I'm eating pork or eating dhabiha or eating halal chicken?
That's a whole
Walmart?
Yeah, that's a whole different conversation, and they don't know, and they on the face of it, they're saying these are terrorist designations, but I can see where they start saying, well, you're practicing Sharia, so you must be a terrorist because Sharia is the same thing that they're practicing over there in those bad countries. But it's because of the public's lack of understanding of what Sharia is, and it's not much different than the Jewish law. It's basically a personal code like that we live by. And they're somehow trying to imply or say that, Muslims are trying to force a Sharia law on the rest of America. How is like 1% of the population going to force the rest of the people to eat halal food? Because that's what our Sharia law, one of them is, okay? As a Muslim believer, we're not going to eat pork, don't drink alcohol. If you're going to marry, this is the marriage rules, divorce rules, inheritance rules. But guess what? Sharia law says alcohol is banned and you shouldn't drink it. There's a lot of Muslims that drink alcohol. It doesn't mean just because it says that. It's a personal thing whether I want to participate in it or not as an individual. No one is forcing anyone to do this. It's a personal choice, and that's freedom of religion.
And how many non-Muslims go to Arabic restaurants in Tampa? Like half of restaurants.
Because they eat halal food. Yeah,
so they eat halal food. So Americans are practicing Sharia indirectly. So they're going
what's also dangerous in this, there's a component that says that Islamic schools, and there are Islamic schools that receive these vouchers, like Christian school. Majority of the private schools or religious schools that receive these vouchers from the state are Christian, Catholic, Jewish. However, there are some Muslim schools, and they're saying, well, the Muslim schools, they should be defunded if they're doing these things. So we only have a minute left, Summer, but we're going to be talking about this probably next week because Floridians need to understand how dangerous and unconstitutional this is. And lawmakers are trying to ram this through, something that doesn't help anything because there's no Sharia problem in the state. And I challenge any public official or any politician to find one case where Sharia law was implemented in court or in Florida life over the laws of the land, because part of Sharia law even says follow the laws of the land that you're in. So this is just, it's so disturbing what's happening. We're out of time. Thank you for joining us. This is True Talk on WMNF Tampa. We'll see you at the same time, same place next week. You could always email us at truetalk@wmnf.org, your comments afterwards. Thanks so much.